Nice to meet you.
You too.
Pippo. It's been a long time that I wanted to meet you. Thanks to Lucy that put me in touch with you, our dear friend. We are in your place, in your beautiful place in Radda, in the countryside. So thank you to welcome us here. And it's a very beautiful place in the Chianti, very green, with all your sculpture in your garden. And it's nice to see in direct your works for the very first time, because I didn't know your art. So I tried to know you better with making some research about your work, about your past, but I have a lot of questions, and that's for why I'm here. In Savoir-Faire, which is a podcast dedicated to the vocation and the way we get to the vocation and to the work of our life. We're going to make it in English, even though you speak French currently and Italian. Your nickname is Pippo, or is it your name?
It has always been my first name, though it's not my legal name.
Okay.
Which is Filippo.
Filippo, okay, so, yes, it's very typical in Italy. So I suppose you are original from Italy.
Lots of origins.
So you're a lot of origin. Pippo, who inspired you to become an artist?
I would say, I don't think I ever thought of it as being an artist. I came from a family of people who created things. Architects, designers, artists. And it was sort of a way of living and a way of looking at the world and the way of doing things. So it was not per se that I thought I was an artist at a certain point. It was more that I was doing things in a way that could be assimilated with art. I started doing art per se when I was very young, and was a painter. I mean, I have paintings that I sold when I was like 12 and 13.
Wow.
And entered a type of academia when I was 13 with a full portfolio. And it's an interesting story because it was a period in New York. My parents, we lived, and the walls were full of art. Artists, friends came. If they saw a white space on a wall, they immediately showed up with a painting. We were in lofts. I saw most of the artists that were in vogue in the 50s and 60s in their studios. So it was a life. It wasn't something that was separated. It was a community that was everywhere.
It was part of your DNA,
exactly.
And not only because you grew up with.
But I did at a certain point start doing art because I had to. I did a portfolio and went into this academy. At that point, I was doing a lot of what we called masking tape art, which was hard line art, very like geometric, very hard lines, stuff like that. And I went to this sort of like Liceo Academia, which was very, very hard to get into, very prestigious, public. It was in Harlem. It was, the cream of the cream. I hated it. The most interesting thing about it was in 68, 69, so the schools were occupied. It was the revolution everywhere. It was much more interesting. And there were...
You mean the life outside?
No,
the
inside.
Academy, the inside.
Inside, because the schools were occupied. University, this city college was across the street. It was occupied. So it was the revolution. That was much more interesting. And when I went to art school, I was already doing art. And I had a lot of people there telling me that wasn't the way you should do things. You should learn to draw. You had to draw naked bodies. You had to do this, and do that. I wasn't into that stuff. I was into doing what I was into. Probably it was interesting for me to have done it, but it was a drag for me. I didn't like it so much.
You born with another, I would say, you were always already in another state of art.
Yeah, but I was into doing it. I wasn't into learning about it. And learning about it was something that I thought I could do looking at what other people did, talking to people. I mean, I was a kid, but it was a community, and therefore, that's my relationship of how I started. I did design for a long time in the middle. I've done many professions. I've been a carpenter, a musician, a bartender, a teacher. I taught mathematics. I mean, I've done many different kinds of things. It all seemed the same to me. At one time, this is sort of maybe jumps further in the discussion, but one time I had to give a lecture at the University of Vermont, and I was sick of talking about what I talked about usually. So I had another idea. I said, I'll take everything I ever did and see who I am. And I found something which I called, I started developing something called gut ideas. Gut ideas.
Oh, gut.
And which is that if I looked at everything I did, there were some ideas that were always the same in music, in art, in painting, in sculpture, and in anything. And so I think there was a connection between all these things, which is who one is, I guess. And so that when you ask, when did I start doing art? I don't know.
Because
I just did it.
You were born.
Yeah. And I even this, and you know, there's a fuzzy line between art and design.
Do you separate the two things?
Yes, I do, but in another way.
With the rationality? Do you think it's a matter of rationality?
No, I think it has to do with who decides what you're doing. When you do design, You're solving a problem.
Absolutely.
And you can solve it creatively, but so when you do design someone, you know, a chair that you can't sit on, it's not a chair. So you can say that it becomes a sculpture or something, but design is something that you basically you have a problem and you solve a problem. We have problems in art that we have to solve, but what determines the solution or what determines the interaction are different parameters, different phenomena. So I don't think it's a very important distinction, but I think the distinction does exist. Yeah, I mean, for me, basically, design is something that has to be immediately functional. Art is something that has to be indirectly useful.
Nice definition.
So it's not the same thing. Both have a relationship to who's seen.
So you say that your first piece of work was a painting with very straight lines. You did things before, but that's the beginning that people start to look at it and say, well, this is art. People say this is art. How did you know it was art? Respect to what you had as an example around you. When was the moment that you said, okay, I'm doing art? Is there a moment that happened? Or it was just an expression of yourself?
I think that I can remember I did strange kinds of sculptures when I was very young with metal and hangers, welding them together and stuff like that. I don't think I thought of it as art. It's something I was doing.
It's a way of living.
Yeah, I think it was a way of doing it. And I think that even today, I guess I make a distinction because I live in a society that makes a distinction. But my feeling about it is that it's stuff I have to learn how to do and to bend and then I have to make things work and stuff like that. I don't have a client, so it's not design per se. But I think it's more important how you do, more interested in how I do what I do than what it is. I mean, it was interesting about your podcast because it's about how. For me, I distinctly think about what the relationship of how to what. How is very important for me in distinguishing what things are. And also, it's more connected into like psychoanalysis. The how is about the meaning behind the form, behind the thing. The how you do stuff. How is it done? How do you understand it? What is the language? What is the structure of the language being used? All these things are really about a feeling, a physical, bodily, psychological feeling that you have in doing it. And then you can say, okay, that's a piece of art. But in a way, when I'm doing it, it's alive.
It becomes
when it's
alive.
done, it's dead. And then someone else looks at it and it becomes alive for them. I don't look at what I do. Usually I don't even like what I do for a long time. So I don't even go back and go in awe over a sculpture. I did it. Like, I'm on to the next thing. But the fact of the how, the worrying about the nights you spend, how alone am I going to move half a ton of sculpture from one place to another? And you spend time. That's a creative process. Mm-hmm. You're creating when you do that. So the fact of not having lots of assistance means that my job creating is about how to do it with my hands and my head, not how to run a business.
Yes.
It's a very different thing. How I take a painting in there, which is 3 meters long and floppy, and roll it up and get it on a wall by myself. That's, I have to think about it. So that's the technique. But in modern art, in contemporary art, the process has become accepted as part of the art itself. It didn't used to be. So, in fact, I can say, lying in bed trying to figure out how to move that sculpture is part of the process. It also means that the sculpture might be different, because maybe I can't move half a ton. Maybe I can move only 300 kilos, which means that you change how you make the sculpture, what the sculpture is.
You just say something interesting about the fact that the process was not part of the art.
No, it wasn't part art in the history of art. Process.
Before.
Yes, I'm not talking about contemporary. I'm talking about in the history of art.
Yes.
We go from the art is the thing, the art is the person, art is the aura, art is the community, art is the manifesto, art is the movement. Art today, a lot is process, even too much. I mean, now all you see on social media is people doing it. It gets very boring now. We've already been through that. We're on to something else now. But I'm saying it's something which was not necessarily part of the history of art before. It was part of making it, of course, but it wasn't part of the...
Yes, it's true. And that's why contemporary art is very up to the time, because it permits the possibility to develop with the time because of the process.
Yeah.
The importance of the process. What fascinating me and what talked to me also, talk to people.
The how.
If they try to understand also, and not just the image. And especially now, which is all image, video and everything, so much image. This part of the process is so important. How would you, it's a strange question. How would you, but I don't like this question. I will come probably...
Give it to me.
So I will come back to that question. How would you define your style?
Okay, I don't know what style means. So I can tell you I'm an abstract artist. I'm not so interested for myself, in figurative art. I think that making art is climbing a very slippery mountain, and I continually climb it, using mediums that are different, using materials that are different, using techniques that are different. And basically, the ideas are all pretty much the same. If I look back over what I've done over the years, it's pretty much looking the same thing. It's different angles of trying to get something and never getting there, or getting there and never getting there. It's hard to tell. I don't know if I ever got there. But I don't think it's a question of style. I can think that they're someone else. That's an art critic. It's for you to decide if their style.
That's what I could see in your work. I'm back with the abstraction and conceptual art, that I think there's something behind all your work, which would be the line of your work, of the way conception. People can get it, as you said, and you give the choice to people to do it. In the 19th, you work with the Facts of Life, which was very of the time, no? The 19th.
The pictogram.
Pictogram. That's up the time of the 19th. I don't remember where I read it, but you feel it was like a criticism of society. So can you consider yourself as engagé? You have to denounce a system all the time, or it was particular of the 19th that you put much intention to denounce a system or the society?
I'm the same person as that.
You involved.
That was art with a message. I make often a distinction between explicit and implicit. That's part of the notion of how. Where's the meaning? Is it explicit or implicit? I think that in those years what I was interested, and the story of Facts of Life is interesting in a way because each of the images is an enigma. It's not a statement. There's no clear statement. Someone says, what do you want to say? I say, what do you see in it? I mean, I did what I did. So even in what I was doing, had exhibitions or things in schools, or there are a lot of videos, blah, 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 blah. They were enigmas. So they were catalysts for thought. I don't believe in a way that, I mean, it's totally different what I'm doing now, but I don't believe it's that different in a way. It just has to do with what the degree of explicit and implicit is. So the other thing is that I got sick of working with a computer. I mean, that's all computer art.
That was in the 90s.
Facts of Life was done on a computer. The animations were done on a computer. It was computer art. So I think that it was also interesting because it was, I don't know if it was really a question of the times. It was about, for me, it was really about, you know what the Facts of Life means in English?
No.
Facts of Life is when your son comes to you and says, and they're 6 or they're 5 and says, Mom, Uncle Joe came and he keeps coming with a guy, where's his wife? You say, in America you would say, you're too young, one day we'll tell you the facts of life. Okay, so all the questions that parents don't want to respond to a child, they say, someday we'll tell you the facts of life. So what are the facts of life? Is anything that was untalkable about, right? That's what the facts of life was in common language. So one day I had this idea that I was going to tell my children the facts of life before they asked, right? So I started writing these things. It was really a drag. It sounded stupid, you know? So, and at the time I was teaching conceptual design in Grande École in Paris, and I was using a lot of symbols to discuss. This is before interface existed, before telephones. And when I was using all these things, we were doing the first critics on what interface was going to be about, what virtuality was going to be about, what the world of everybody like this or like this was going to be about, before it existed. And I was using all these symbols. And one day I decided maybe I should write these enigma things in symbols instead of in text, because the text was really boring. And that's when I started. I started writing these kind of enigmas about what was equality, what was handicap, what was the world, the north-south hemisphere, about what was violence, what was the perpetuation of violence, what was virtuality, so there are a lot of them that have to do with computers before virtuality existed, and as people connected with cables and stuff, and dying connected to a computer, or having birth connected to a computer. It was the beginning, right? So it had to do with enigma and the truth. And what is about the truth there is there's no written truth. It's a series of things that you come to yourself. That's Facts of Life. So you say, well, where is that where are you today with respect to that? It's not the mountain I'm climbing. I'm climbing another mountain.
And the fact that you can still be engaged in what, as you said, you're still the same artist, but with the culture, with those lines, I would say elemental lines, fluid, you give maybe more liberty because there are no figuration, and it's very up to this time.
I taught in Gaiole. I taught abstraction to terzo, quarto e quinto, elementari.
Wow.
That's a picture of, and so I think, and I taught abstraction. I talked about Hegel. I talked about John Cage, about many artists, about the world we live in, about ideas. I think the political move today, the most important political move that you can do is working in schools, working with kids.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that there's a thing. So my political action as an artist is more about presenting a possibility of learning to think and to be critical than that it be a line or a curve or a red or a white. Or I don't think that's that important. I think that's my own problem or my own thing. The real problem today is developing a critical mind. And you do that when you're a child. You don't do that necessarily when you're an adult. You're already there, you're not there. And so I think that coming back to, is my work, is that or this or that critical? In me, for it is, because it's the mountain I'm climbing and I keep slipping down. But I think that there are other ways to do the politics. So I think everything is political.
And
yes.
Also the perception of things in a different way.
No, I think that the problems we are in today are much, much more perverse, are much more vicieux. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're up against manipulation of mind, which is so pervasive that, the simple fact of presenting an alternative to the systems that exist today, just the fact that could be an alternative is already extremely radical. Mm-hmm. But everything is being eaten up continually by the system we're living. So you have to go very fast. I mean, it's very complicated. That's where the punctum is.
And how was the reaction of people in this elementary school?
Fantastic.
The kids, they
were much more advanced than the adults.
Uh-huh. More open-minded.
Yes, and also, I mean, first of all, they were very happy because there were no grades.
Yes.
Second of all,
important.
I told everybody, the teachers, not to talk to them about their work. Not, this is beautiful, this is good, this is bad. I said, no, just let them do their thing. And then we did a lot of really interesting exercises, which were like they would have to find their journey around a piece of work, and they would have to sing the journey. They would have to get in. They'd have to find the door in and out of a piece of work. And there were all sorts of things. And so kids that were, Gaiolo was probably near 50% immigrant. Mm-hmm. So there were people who were already, trilingual. Yeah. They already were translating and into some kind of abstraction and stuff. Little kids. And so the fact of being there and treating them as adults, they were happy about that. Mm-hmm. I remember I was walking down the street with a good friend who is a critic and also an architect. We were talking about something else, and a kid comes up on his bike, and I say, I don't remember what his name was. I said, so how are you doing? He said, bad. How come? Malevich has a problem. Okay, what's his problem? So he said, oh, this and that, I don't know what it is. I said, yeah, but I said, so why is it a problem? Said, I don't know, because he doesn't seem clear on what he's doing. I said, but that's Malevich's problem. Where are you at with your work? This is a little kid on a bike, right? We're in the middle of the piazza in Gaiolo. We're talking about Malevich. And I said, so show me your work. So he pulls out his phone, and we were doing abstract photography with your telephone. Wow. So I said, take this piece of junk you have, use it as a tool. So they were using to make these things. And he started showing me these images. We're in the middle of Gaiolo. A little kid is showing me abstract art on his phone after we got rid of the Malevich problem. And he's into it in the sky. I'm with it. Carlo Neppi was like, So these kids were functioning as people. They weren't little kids. They weren't problems. They were doing stuff. They were creating stuff. That's a political act. It's not about political parties. It's not about laws and policy and stuff like that. But it's giving some kid a door. Mm-hmm. Giving some kid a possibility to use his head.
A responsibility.
And a responsibility, absolutely.
To do something, do something.
Yeah.
Bellissimo, davvero.
It has become quite a political discussion we're having.
No,
Not so much about art.
No, that's fine. We were talking.
I'm
That's something that is part of your language from the very beginning. That's as I said. I see the line of your work. This is not only
It's
political.
not off the subject.
It's about what you do. So and know how you do it.
Yeah.
So it's important, and this opened another door to maybe the way to approach art and abstraction with the kids here in Italy. We so much need, because the history, but history is history. You need.
It's very heavy.
Yes, you need to open a little bit more, in my opinion. So, and you're also, well, I wanted to ask you what's your mission, but I think you expressed it already. So, how does your personal experiences influence your language?
Ooh. Okay, so we have to discuss what we mean by language. Do you mean my language?
I mean that line we were...
Okay.
We were talking about, which is yours, not only language
Okay, I'm going to answer like this. I have continually a problem, which is that I am, like we all are probably, composed of contradictory tendencies. So, one of my tendencies is to look for the most essential, pure expression of something. My other tendency is totally explosive and to make the biggest mess I can. So you might say this is complicated to have these two things. In other words, one of the tendencies is somewhat minimalist and essential, and the other is more spontaneous and seeks to find the form through things that I am doing, but not necessarily conscious of doing. Okay, if you look in that room, you'll see that it's a mixture of two totally different things. Some of this stuff is going all over the place. Some of it is very just essential and just looking for the right angle. You say, this is some kind of schizophrenic. So, in a way, I would answer your question by saying that in a sort of a dialectical fashion, saying the language is a product of contradictory forces. It's a meeting of things having language, of having meaning in a particular direction, and destructive or disruptive forces that put into question that essentialness and go towards something else. To give you an example, that on the wall, right, looks like that before, and then I run over it with a tractor. Okay, so you could say, I am in the tractor. I put the sculpture on the ground. I produce the things the way it is before. Then I go over it on a tractor. I'm running the tractor. I am the person who's enacting on that material. But how it ends up, I don't know. I run over it, look at it, and then I have to run over it again, or not, or rip it apart. So there's a moment of falling through space, of not knowing. So in terms of language, I think more important than language, I think comes back to how you do things, the process. Mm-hmm. It's not so much, is that your style, is that your language, stuff. I give you another language problem. For a long time, I made things that had straight lines. Okay? I'm not someone really in the image of myself that's into curves. Look around here. All you see is curves, right? So it's all curves. It's all, and curves is bodies, curves is nature, curves is straight lines or more abstract. The language is a meeting between contradictory tendencies, which are not contradictory in reality. It's all part of form. But I think that language per se is is everything. I mean, in a psychoanalytical fashion, and I'm, issued from a sort of Lacanian tendency.
Lacanian?
Lacan.
Lacan.
Jacques Lacan. Where, everything is language.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another interesting story, relationship between art and Lacan. So I think that in terms of that, I think that, yes, I haven't answered your question properly. I think I went off the subject.
No, you were not out, but probably because you describe the process as language. There's some days your explosive way will go out more. You talk about
it's periods, it's cycles.
Exactly. And so, it affects your personal experience and feelings, affect the energy that you will go to process on the material. So you answer to the question. It's a different...
But I believe that the language is essential. I believe that languages are very important. I believe that I am a product of multi-language, multiculture, and therefore it comes back to not so much am I in one of those languages, but I'm really in the fact that they're sort of a mess of them. It's a sort of a mixture.
Yes.
So that is a determining factor in my way of thinking.
That's interesting because you said at the very beginning of the interview that you are very much origin. So probably the fact that there are always the sign and attention to police d'écriture, and the sign you have on the paper, the way you curve and the form that you have of your masterpiece is quite a universal way to communicate what you are. Something that very basically everybody can get to it and see it without looking for an image or...
It's also why, for instance, often people ask the question, why is everything in black and white? Because if I show you a painting, the same thing in yellow, the first thing you see is yellow. In that tendency of trying to find the essential in the form. So there's a process, there's a kind of a schema, which would be trying to find the essential in the form and then trying to understand what is the meaning or non-meaning in the form. So we're back to explicit and implicit again.
Yes.
Okay, so the form itself, looking for the essential in the form, is going towards something where it's easier to get to a non-polluted, some kind of non-polluted, implicit idea, where to get there you have to clean stuff out because otherwise it just gets so
destructive
or just messy. Yeah, it's a process. There's another idea I could tell you about. It's not language. It's a sort of a problematique, which is that I recently, this is sort of an anecdote, this illustration. Someone came recently, we were sitting at the table and we were talking about my work and stuff like that. And there were all these little sculptures on the table there, right? These little ones. And there were like 10 of them, looked almost identical. And she said, well, what about this one? And I said, that's wrong. And then she took out another one. I said, what about this one? No, that's wrong too. She said, but they're the same. I said, no, not exactly. And so she took out another one. Is that, no. And so I said, that one's good. And so she said, why is this one good and not that good? And I said, because these are all stereotypic. That one's not. These are the obvious angle that you would do. Or I thought one. This, no. Okay, but it looked the same. I mean, we're talking about half a degree or degree difference in an angle. It's it's bullshit in a way. But in a way, no. It's about something so the problem of the stereotypic is something which in the work I do now is something that bothers me. I'm not into it. I try to escape the stereotypic. Maybe it's unescapable, but that's another driving force, is to do over and over again, and then you create a tension. And the tension should be on the knife edge between acceptable and unacceptable, comfortable, uncomfortable. There's that strange line that you can find. And it's different for everybody. I mean, it doesn't mean that if I find a line, it's the same. But there's a line. And that's what creates the tension. That's what's interesting, is where you create the tension. And then you release the tension. And in that tension is a question of how recognizable or how predictable a form is.
You said before you play music, you play jazz. Huh?
I did.
But are you still playing a little bit?
No.
No.
Not for the moment. I come back every so often to it. But I have a group called Action Reaction Group, and you can see them on YouTube. And I play painting while they make. So that's still going on. It's an interesting concept because Action Reaction came also out of that idea of gut ideas. What was interesting me in music, or the way I played music, was similar to the way I was making art or making other kinds of art. And so I had a different series of experiences with that, and then started working with the group here. And it was very interesting to try to figure out how to do it, because it was complicated to work together. And the idea was they would read the paintings being done as if it were music in any possible direction. And I would improvise simultaneously on what they were playing. So there was a notion of how to improvise together and the complexities of what that meant and time. I mean, most people's relationship to a musical piece is like 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Well, it's not hard to make a painting in 5 minutes. How do you do that? Paintings are layers. In music, it's layers at the same time. There were many things that were interesting crossovers. Yeah, so the instrument I was doing was more about, it was my own movement, because I was moving also on the space. So it was experimental.
Yeah.
And it was interesting.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's another kind of thing that...
It's a genre with... It's
exactly. And it's interesting because this stuff we do can be very rich. There can be a lot of things going on. It becomes very interesting because there's a lot of possibilities if you're open to them. Yeah, it's only 24 hours in a day, but that's too bad.
And you said you played in Paris and...
yeah, I used to play music. I played here.
You mean with another...
Saxophone.
Saxophone, you played saxophone.
When I was here, I lived here in the beginning of the 80s.
Yeah.
79, 80. And I played in a salsa band in Florence.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I played salsa and free jazz. I played it a lot.
My husband is a jazz musician.
What does he play?
Guitar.
Really fantastic.
But he came to the guitar after playing...
the bass.
Mostly guitar, but classical.
Okay.
And then he's from Napoli, so he has the sound very contaminated with soft...
tarantella.
Yes, a little bit, but more lyric, I would say madrigali and all.
Cool.
It is the very old and medieval music.
Cool. We have to meet.
Yeah, absolutely. No, now I'm with the funny question the more easy. If I ask you what's the first song that come in your mind or first music, what would it be? Maybe a sound?
Many of them. And
here
indiscriminately.
You are in a place where silence is full of sound and...
Yes and no, because one thing which is interesting about this space, but you could even say outside the same, is that I grew up in an urban setting. I mean, I grew up in, a funky part of New York. Here, there are times I put on Ornette Coleman and I'm in here and the lights are there and this is somewhere else. And then you open the door and we're in the middle of sort of some rugged part of the woods and stuff. It's interesting, those
contrasts.
Yeah, those contrasts and the meeting of those contrasts. But I think there's always sound. But I couldn't say what it is. But I grew up, listening to soul music, and funk, and
But for example, the last CD that
I change all the time.
You change all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's
it
quite,
moves around.
Yes.
I can bring something back to this idea that I don't much like stereotypic music unless it's really stereotypic. Like I can listen to the Supremes, or I can listen to Prince or Bach, which is very stereo. Oh, that's right. But then if it's coming to having to listen to something more jazz, I can't deal with stereotypic jazz anymore. It's gone for me. I don't want to listen to it. Okay, so it has to do with what I'm feeling. Do I just want to move my ass, or do I want to get taken somewhere? If I want to get taken somewhere, I don't want to listen to reoccurrent themes.
Maybe because you want to be participated to the music now? Or?
Yeah, no, I mean, for instance, if you listen to all the music in Action Reaction, it's all stuff that no one knew where we were going. The sound, sometimes it works, sometimes but it's not only improvisation, because if you listen to a lot of jazz musicians improvise, they're doing licks. What they've already heard, and now a little bit of Charlie Parker, now a little bit of this Coltrane, and I'm going to go a little chocolate, and a little Herbie Hancock.
The stand-up.
Okay. But they're coming back with little risks and stuff, and even some of the changes or some of the harmonies and stuff are coming back. So interesting about some music, some contemporary music, or I find you don't know where it's going to go. If from one second to another something's happening. And that I find interesting. And I know a lot of people who hate that, who can't stand that. I understand. They want to be the comfort zone. And sometimes I don't want the comfort zone. Other times, I just want to put something on that I've heard before, and it's the comfort zone, blah, blah, blah. But it's not for me the same.
Well, it's quite very close to your personality. Yeah. As you said, every contact that you have with life is following this point of view. So, what event will you be part of? Exhibition, or the next exhibition you will have? You don't know.
I sort of dropped out of the scene and been into a fairly long period now of just doing my work. I mean, I have 2 sort of exhibitions in Paris coming up, but they're not solo exhibitions. They will be interesting, but they're not. I don't know. It has to happen. But I'm not doing really what I should do to get it. I'm not going out there pushing my stuff. And I'll tell you a sort of a funny story, which is that this is sort of my way of doing things, which is there's a sculpture here that was going to be made gigantic by a big company, a big industry near here. And they wanted a gigantic sculpture, so it was going to be made 6 meters high, and we did all the AutoCAD drawings to have this produced, because I can't produce it. It's made in big steel and trucks. And part of the deal was that they would do a catalog for the exhibition, for this sculpture, and there would be an exhibition. Then the war happened, and the price of steel went up considerably, and the whole thing stopped. But I had already started the catalog. I did it myself. I was going to give it to someone else. I started the catalog and I started working on it. And so then the thing stopped. I said, well, fuck it. I mean, I'll do it myself. And so I did the catalog, put out the catalog myself. Since then, I found an editor, a publisher who put it out. But, it became an act. So it became my exhibition for that period of time. I miss having big exhibitions. Big ones I've had. I miss it. I don't know where I'd have it today. I don't want to go and kiss ass in cocktail parties to get it. I'm out of the scene. I just do my work. So it'll happen, it won't happen. It might happen tomorrow.
How was Centre Pompidou?
It was a book signing.
Book signing?
Yeah. So it was they saw the bookstore and saw the catalog and then wanted it. And they said, well, do a presentation here. And I said, okay. So I did.
Was it a nice experience?
It was fantastic.
Yes, I imagine.
Mostly the thing that was fantastic was that I get depressed after an exhibition, an opening. I just,
really?
I can't deal with it. So, and my kids know this. So they had made a party after, a fantastic party. So, and that solves everything. And I've done that here. After exhibitions I've had here, I made a big party here. And people know that they have to sort of make this party happen, because then I won't get depressed. So So in Paris was fantastic. They had a great party afterwards, and my son cooked for many, many people, and it was a big blast, and that was cool. So that was fun.
Amazing.
It was worth the party.
So bad things come with the
Yeah. No,
purpose.
it was great.
I mean,
The presentation was great, but then the thing that was like, it was the party.
Well, but thank you. I think I.
No more questions?
No, you reply to all my questions very naturally. Sometimes
Okay.
that you reply to it.
Okay.
Yes.
I have to think if there's anything else I need to tell you.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Probably. We could do the same interview in French now.
Oui, on peut.
Non, pas maintenant.
Ça changera.
Oui,
Ça changera complètement parce que comme ça, tu peux...
Oui, c'est différent. C'est très différent.
Mais I think that... Pour toi, c'est mieux français ou anglais? Anglais. Okay. I think that there are things experiences that I've had in my life that I've had in a certain language. And they're not easy to talk about in another language. And so that's a common thing with the multilingual lives, is that you get there experiences that I've had that I could that would be more comfortable if we talk about in French, because I've had them in France.
Yeah,
and even certain vocabulary doesn't exist.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I will do it another one, because some other question will come up. Probably.
Yeah, that'd be
Sorry
interesting
for my big French accent.
No, it's fantastic. But it's interesting to have, for instance, I've had one of the articles in the catalog is an article by, I finished the catalog and I showed it to different people, and it was sort of a running disaster. You know, I showed it to some people, they say, take all that stuff out, you can't have that stuff in there. So I just say, put all that stuff back, you really need that stuff. No, it was interesting. Because I didn't have an editor in the beginning. I didn't have a publisher. So I was doing it myself. So I would send it to someone, and they'd say, take all the pictures of yourself out. It should be just the art. And then I show it to my daughter, who's an art historian. And she said, put all the pictures back. That's all I want to see. And so in that, I finished everything, and I brought it to Paris to show a woman, a friend of mine, an artist who I've had long discussions with about. We see each other every couple of months for years, and we create each other's work and stuff like that. I showed it to her, said, it's great, but it's missing you. You're not there. Where are you? And so I said, well, what do you mean? She said, but you didn't write anything. I said, I don't want to write no artist statement. I don't like that. And she said, yeah, but you have to do something. And so I said, well, I have an idea. You interview me. And she said, she said, well, when? And we couldn't find a time. So I said, we'll do it right now. So we took the telephone and turned it on. And I said, let's just have a discussion. So in the thing, it's called meeting, and we discuss stuff, you know. So, but we did it in French. And the catalog's not in French, it's in English and Italian. So I had to translate this thing. So for instance, every 2 minutes, she says, finalement, blah, 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 blah. How do you translate finalement? It doesn't exist. Then, but it sounds heavy. So there are these things there's articulating things that were very hard to translate.
Yes. I make translation, and I know what you mean. Translation and transcription also. This one, for example, for 45 minutes, it's 10 pages of 10 pages.
Yeah.
So it's quite a lot of work, but it's interesting.
You can't do it automatically?
Yeah, it does, but you have to correct.
Of course.
I have and I'm a writer, so I needed to.
Also, you can make it better. If you find something that I said,
sometimes
make it better.
This make it better. Finally, I would find a way to make it aesthetically.
Make it better. Just make it more.
This won't be transcribed. This one for now, but maybe one day I will transcribe it. Okay. Maybe this will be on Spotify. The time I cut, Well, it was very nice to meet you.
Absolutely.
And I hope to have the possibility to meet you again and maybe make music together.
Sure.
Who knows?
I have to start making music again.
Well, yeah. I will
the horn is over there. It's ready, but
yes,
I haven't.
I should make a picture. Now I'm going to.
No, because it's a part of my past. So.
Well, but that's
you can show it. Yeah.
It's there on the.
Yeah. I almost started again. But it was
tonight you will start.
It's also when I do stuff, I have to do it all day, every day, and it just becomes too many things to do.
Yeah, I know.
So that's one.
Well, thank you very much, Pippo.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
I'm sure I forgot to say a lot of important things.
Well,
but I have to
think about it.
Think about it. I'll call you up at 4:00 in the morning and say, Maggie, I have to tell you this. I forgot. It's the most important thing. That's all that stuff. Throw that away. This is it. This is the most important thing. But I'm sleeping. Yeah, but I have to take this.
Please do it, but please don't call me. Send me a voicemail. That way, I put it in this podcast. Huh?
Okay.
You have to assume it.
Okay.
Well, thank you.